The mid-1990s was a troubled period for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, where peace was a distant memory and civil wars and conflicts were ongoing. The echoes of colonial exploitation still reverberated through the land, and the scars of decades of political instability ran deep through every village, every family, and every heart. In the eastern part of the country, ethnic tensions and external interventions that had affected people for centuries provided sufficient reason for a spark to ignite. This spark was the Second Congo War, which broke out in 1998, engulfing the nation in what would become one of Africa's deadliest conflicts. Our story will be told through the eyes of 15-year-old Gugulethu, who lived in a small village during this chaotic time. Gugulethu was a young boy who farmed by the river with his family, living a life that seemed timeless in its simplicity. His days were spent waking up with the morning sun, its golden rays filtering through the mist that rose from the river each dawn. He would work in the fields alongside his father and older brother, learning the rhythms of the land and the secrets of cultivation that had been passed down through generations. In the evenings he would play football with friends in the village square, their laughter echoing across the fields as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and red. The village where Gugulethu lived was a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone else. Elders were respected, children were cherished, and the bonds of kinship extended far beyond blood relations. Market days were celebrations of life, with women selling vegetables, men discussing politics under the shade of ancient trees, and children running between the stalls with boundless energy. However, the peaceful life in the village was beginning to shake with the genocide in Rwanda and the ensuing influx of refugees. When Gugulethu saw the refugee camps surrounding his village, he could feel the fear and despair in the eyes of the people. Their hollow stares haunted him, their stories of unimaginable violence whispered in the shadows. The arrival of the refugees changed everything. The village, once isolated from the larger conflicts brewing in the region, suddenly found itself at the crossroads of history. Aid workers appeared, setting up tents and distributing food. Foreign journalists with cameras documented the suffering, their presence a constant reminder that the world was watching but doing little to help. And with them came rumors of armed groups, militias, and foreign armies moving through the forests. Stories circulated of villages burned, of people murdered in their homes, of children forced to become soldiers. The atmosphere in the village grew tense, with every stranger viewed with suspicion and every sound in the night causing panic. Gugulethu's father began speaking in hushed tones with other village men late into the night, their faces illuminated by firelight, discussing what should be done if the violence reached their home. They debated whether to stay and defend their land or to flee at the first sign of trouble. Some argued for resistance, others for caution. The women, meanwhile, began hiding what valuables they had and preparing emergency supplies. Gugulethu's mother sewed money into the lining of their clothes and filled containers with water and dried food. The entire village was preparing for the worst, even as they hoped it would never come. One day, terrifying sounds began to emanate from a nearby forest. The sound of gunfire, distant at first, grew closer with each passing hour. Gugulethu, curious about the source of these sounds and driven by the fearless curiosity of youth, started walking towards the forest despite his mother's warnings to stay close to home. The path was familiar to him. He had walked it 1,000 times to collect firewood and hunt small game, but today the forest felt different. The usual sounds of birds and insects were absent, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by those distant booms. When he reached the source of the sounds, he saw a group of men dressed in military uniforms. They were not the government soldiers he had occasionally seen passing through the village. These men had a different bearing, harder, more dangerous. Their uniforms were mismatched, their weapons varied, and their eyes were cold. As he tried to run away in fear, a few soldiers blocked his path. "Where are you going, boy?" shouted one soldier, his voice rough and threatening. Gugulethu, frightened, stepped back and ran home as fast as his legs could carry him. In that moment, he realized that war was not far from his home. It was already at his doorstep. That night their village was attacked by rebels. The peaceful darkness was shattered by gunfire and screams. Flames leapt from house to house as thatched roofs caught fire. Gugulethu had to flee with his family from their home, grabbing only what they could carry in their hands. His mother clutched his youngest sister to her chest, while his father tried to gather what little food they had. As they ran toward the forest by the river, Gugulethu felt a great fear in his heart, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Along with his family, he got lost among neighbors and acquaintances who had also fled, all of them stumbling through the darkness. Guided only by the light of the burning village behind them, when Gugulethu realized his brother was missing, his heart felt like it would burst. In the chaos of the attack, in the smoke and confusion, his older brother had disappeared. Gugulethu wanted to go back, to search for him, but his father grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. "We cannot stop," his father said, tears streaming down his face. "We must survive." But Gugulethu's brother was lost deep in the forest, and they had no way of knowing if he was alive or dead. During their escape, Gugulethu and his family came together with other refugees. Hundreds, then thousands of people were fleeing to reach a safe place, all moving in the same direction, like a great river of humanity. They had gone days without food and were exhausted. Children cried for water. Old people collapsed by the roadside, and the strong tried to help the weak. When they finally reached the refugee camp after a week of walking, Gugulethu looked around in despair. Everywhere was crowded, filled with tears and blood. The camp stretched as far as the eye could see, a city of makeshift shelters and desperate people. Long lines formed in the camp to find food and water. People waited for hours in the scorching sun, hoping for a handful of rice or a cup of clean water. Arguments broke out frequently as supplies ran short and tempers flared. Gugulethu watched as camp workers, overwhelmed and exhausted themselves, tried to maintain order and distribute aid fairly. But there was never enough. The international community had promised help, but the aid was slow to arrive and inadequate when it did. Diseases were targeting children and the elderly, spreading rapidly through the crowded, unsanitary conditions. Cholera, malaria, and dysentery swept through the camp in waves. Gugulethu watched as camp workers, many of them volunteers from relief organizations, tried to treat the sick with limited medicine and supplies. Makeshift hospitals were set up in large tents, but they were always full. Every day brought new funerals, small bodies wrapped in whatever cloth could be found. The burial ground at the edge of the camp grew larger each week, a grim testament to the human cost of war. Gugulethu helped dig graves, a task that haunted his dreams but taught him about the fragility of life and the importance of community even in death. Gugulethu decided to participate in educational programs to cope with the difficulties he faced in the camp. A group of volunteers had set up a makeshift school under a large tree, using donated materials to teach children who had been torn from their normal lives. His teachers emphasized the importance of leaving the war behind and looking to the future. They spoke of peace, of rebuilding, of dreams that seemed impossibly distant. Education felt like a way of salvation for Gugulethu. Every day he got lost among the books, trying to escape the pain brought by the war. The words on the page transported him to other worlds, other times, places where war was just a distant memory. However, his mind was constantly occupied with thoughts of his missing brother and the village he wanted to return to. At night, lying on the hard ground of the tent he shared with his family, he would imagine his brother's face, wonder where he was, hope against hope that he was alive somewhere. He dreamed of their home, of the fields by the river, of the life they had lost. Over time, friendships formed within the camp. Gugulethu played games with other children, improvising toys from scraps of wire and cloth. They shared stories, each tale a testament to what they had lost and what they hoped to regain. They mourned their losses together, creating a community of young survivors who understood each other's pain in ways adults could not. These bonds made him feel he was not alone. The children, facing the brutal face of war, supported each other through the darkest times, One day, the camp leader announced that he would organize a fun event for the children. It would be a celebration, a brief respite from the suffering. Gugulethu was eager to participate in this event. For one afternoon, they would have football matches, singing and dancing. It was a small thing, but in that place of despair, it meant everything. By 2002, hopes began to emerge that the war was coming to an end. The overthrow of Laurent Désiré Kabila had brought a wind of change across the country. Peace talks were underway, and there were rumors that people could return to their homes. Gugulethu decided to return to his village with his family. The journey back was long and difficult, but it was filled with hope rather than fear. However, when they returned to their village, the sight that met them was devastating. The destruction caused by the war had engulfed everything. Gugulethu's home was in ruins, just burned walls and ashes. The fields had become barren, overgrown with weeds. The village square where he had played was scarred by bullets and abandoned. Of the families that had lived there, only a handful had returned. The villagers decided to unite to overcome the devastation caused by the war. Gugulethu, along with other children in the village, began working to revive the agricultural land. They cleared fields, planted seeds, and prayed for rain. Although everyone could not forget the pains of the past, they were hopeful for the future. Gugulethu tried to lead the village's youth by initiating educational projects to help children distance themselves from the effects of war. He organized study groups, contacted aid organizations for supplies, and worked with returning teachers to restart the village school. Over time, the villagers began to come together again, working in solidarity. Gugulethu, by taking the lead, directed other youth towards education. He initiated psychological support programs to overcome the negative effects of the war. This process helped heal the villagers. With education, health and agriculture projects, the village began to recover from the destruction of the war. Slowly, painfully, life returned to normal. Gugulethu did not lose hope for the future of his village. The end of the war was just the beginning. Gugulethu and the villagers stood together, leaving the pains of the past behind while never forgetting them. One day, they gathered in the village square with the community. Gugulethu thanked the people for their help during the rebuilding process. "We will not forget the pains brought by war," he said, his voice steady and clear. "But together, we will build our future." Gugulethu saw that the bonds between the villagers had strengthened through their shared suffering and rebuilding. The Second Congo War has gone down in history as a tragedy that affected millions of lives. More than 5 million people died, making it the deadliest conflict since World War II. However, the life of young people like Gugulethu showed how hope and solidarity could flourish even amid war. The destruction caused by war was overcome by the resilience of the people. Congo was a country filled with the traces of the past, but looking towards the future with hope. Gugulethu spent the rest of his life in his village, trying to erase the scars of war. Education and solidarity were his and the village's greatest weapons. He became a teacher, dedicating his life to educating the next generation. The future of Congo would be shaped by the hopes of young people like Gugulethu. This story, while revealing the destructive effects of war and the efforts of people to rebuild, served as a reminder that hope always exists, even in the darkest times. Gugulethu aimed to organize a memorial event for his lost brother in the years to come, teaching the village youth not to forget the pains of war, but to look forward with hope. Every year at the events he held in the village square, he aimed to inspire the new generations by sharing the destruction of war and the power of solidarity. When the sorrows of Congo were intertwined with Gugulethu's story, it became not only a tragedy, but also a story of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit.